This is the fifth video in our series to visit people in communities that have faced the issues of dam removal. In this video, we meet Bob Martini in the town of Merrill, Wisconsin. Bob worked for 32 years for the Wisconsin DNR, leading the cleanup of the Wisconsin River, acid rain research, and groundwater contamination in the Central Sands region. Bob worked on dam issues including FERC licensing renewal for nearly 100 hydro dams and several dam removals. He has served on dozens of environmental and education boards, and in retirement, he insists on spending a few hours every day in wild places with clean water. The town of Merrill was originally a logging town named Jerry Bull Falls. The area was first inhabited by the Chippewa Indians, and in 1843, a trading post was constructed near the town. John Freely was the first settler.
Hi, we're here this morning at Merrill, Wisconsin, on the site of the former Ward paper mill dam with Bob Martini, who had
In fact, we would be underwater right now. We're in the old pond.
Well, I'm glad it's dry, but it's sure chilly. We're with Bob Martini, who had a key role in the project here, and we wanted to talk about some of the parallels between this project and what we have facing us in River Falls. So Bob, can you introduce yourself, please, and tell us what role that you had in the project to remove the Ward paper mill dam and the restoration of the Prairie River corridor along here?
Well, I spent about 32 years with Wisconsin DNR, and I was a river protection coordinator for the entire state of Wisconsin. In this particular project, I was the project manager for the removal of the Ward Dam. The Prairie River had 4 dams on it, and we removed all 4 of them over the years. This was the last one. This was the one that was preventing upstream and downstream movement of both warm water and cold water fishes in the stream. So it was an important keystone location because again, the fisheries require migration. They need to move to different habitats at different times of the year, and this dam prevented that. Mm-hmm. So I worked for years on the Prairie River, not only on fisheries, but especially on water quality and dam removal.
Mm-hmm. And how far is the bottom end of this impoundment from the Wisconsin River?
The dam is about a mile from the Wisconsin River, and most of that is in the city of Merrill. And it was very key because there are many houses and also the public library who were in the floodway. And the old dam was a high hazard dam because of the number of buildings downstream. So in the dam break analysis, it showed that most of those houses would have been flooded and the library would have been flooded, which meant that none of them could get loans from the bank because they were in the floodway of the dam break analysis. Sure. With the dam removed, that restriction went away, and eventually the public library borrowed money to build an extension which went out into the former floodway, but they were able to get bank loans for it. So that's just a small improvement that many citizens below the dam found. Above the dam, we had 120 acres of impounded water, which extended about a mile upstream from the dam.
Now, what was the situation with the sediment here in the impounded area?
Well, this was a very shallow impoundment. There were very few areas in this pond that were over 10 feet deep, except for right in the channel. And there was a lot of sediment. In many cases, several feet of sediment. Not anywhere near as much as we had up at Prairie Dells, though, the next dam upstream. When that dam went out, we estimated 20,000 cubic yards of sediment, and we built a sediment trap downstream to try to harvest some of that. We took out 20,000 cubic yards, and it still inundated the entire area downstream, completely covered the boulder field downstream for miles. And this is because that whole area downstream was sediment starved for 100 years. Sure. And when the sediment that normally would have moved through onto the Wisconsin River couldn't do that because it was stopped by the dam. And the same thing happened here.
And Prairie Dells was a much higher dam than
that was
than
65
Ward.
feet ahead.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty good sized dam because of the gorge that it was in.
Sure. So this was a shallower one. This was probably, what, 15 or 16 feet?
16 feet ahead.
Yeah. And
The dam was owned by International Papers. It was originally built in, I think, 1904, but International Papers owned it, and they were producing about $30,000 worth of electricity per year. Their insurance alone was $50,000 per year.
Oh.
The previous year, before the dam went out, they had $107,000 in damage claims by the 100 homes that were around the pond, because the old wooden gates got cocked and they couldn't open the gate, so flooding occurred upstream. So there was clearly no business reason for the paper mill to own that dam. So they wanted to remove it. And in addition, the paper mill abandoned their operation, which was one of the highest paying jobs in the city of Merrill. So people were angry at them anyway for pulling out. When they found out that they wanted to remove the dam as well to remove liability, they were furious.
Yeah.
I mean, people were upset all over the city.
But eventually it came out that the paper company was the owner of the dam. They had the right to ask to remove it.
Yep.
And nobody wanted to step up to replace the dam.
Which is the case almost all over the state.
Sure.
I mean, you have two choices in Wisconsin. You either meet Chapter 31 dam safety standards, or you take the dam out.
Yeah.
Two choices. And that's all you have as a dam owner. In this case, it was obvious that it didn't pay. The estimate for repairing that dam was $2 million. Well, the people tried to get it from the state and the county and the federal government. Nobody wanted to put money in it, least of all International Papers.
How did that cost compare with the cost to remove?
The cost to remove was really low. Of course, International Papers had to pay the cost of removing. We didn't need any grants or anything to do it, unlike some other dams around the state. They were the owner. They were willing to do it. The cost to remove was just a few $100,000. The cost to repair was $2 million.
Okay.
Plus, they would have the liability, and they wouldn't be able to make up the deficit on operating expenses.
So eventually, you got the International Paper, who owned the dam, got the okay to remove it, and then came the opportunity to restore this impoundment. Now, how did the ownership of the impoundment, who owned the floor of the impoundment?
When this dam was built around 1904, the first thing they did was try to acquire all the land in the expected flooded area. And they were pretty good about it. They got about 90 to 95% of the ownership of the land. So International Papers owned most of the bed under the water. There were a few parcels where the original owner, pre-1904, owned all the way to the center of the stream. So that complicated the development and planning of the park, because the trails would have to cross private property. They would need an easement or a purchase agreement to get the trails across those private parcels. Eventually it was all worked out, but because International Papers and their predecessor owners got 90 to 95% of the ownership of the bed, it really made it a lot simpler.
And did they sell it to the city, or give it to the city?
They gave it to the city.
They gave it to the city.
120 acres.
Okay.
Merrill was known as the city of parks for decades and decades. And that was one of the selling points we were trying to make, is that this could be a keystone park because it's on the approach to the city. It's a riverine stretch, and you could restore prairie and walking trails and all kinds of other things. So it appealed to their City of Parks attitude, but they really knew that they couldn't very well support dam removal because the people were so angry.
But they eventually accepted that.
Oh yes, they did accept it. The Wisconsin DNR gave them funding through stewardship to develop this pavilion and the snowmobile bridge and a few other trails, that sort of thing. We, DNR, did fisheries work, put in hundreds of boulder retards in the river after it had stabilized, after the sediment was moved on through. And then thousands of trees and shrubs with our normal wildlife plantings packages. Basically designed the whole park using stewardship money, and then funded most of it. So the city of Merrill didn't have to put much money into park development, but they then objected to park maintenance. The long-term cost of maintenance is always the one that they have to worry about. But they eventually agreed to it. And when the ribbon cutting ceremony was here, the mayor, who had previously staunchly opposed dam removal, was right there to cut the ribbon and say, "This is a beautiful park for the city of Merrill forever," and on and on.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the process of restoration of the former impoundment here after the dam is removed.
Well, we didn't have any funds at the time to do that. What we were concentrating on was to try to keep all the sediment in place, if possible, to prevent it from going downstream and causing problems in the lower river or in the Wisconsin River.
How did you do that here?
We were fortunate to have an intact operating structure where we could slowly draw down. We drew it down.
You mean
the
dam
fall.
itself?
The dam itself.
Uh-huh.
We drew it down in the fall, in September and October, hoping that we could get it done early enough so that the seed bank that was already in the soil from the whole watershed would immediately sprout and form a root system that would hold that soil and hold that sediment until we could decide what to do with it in the future years. It took maybe a week to go from brown to green after the drawdown was complete, and then the sediment is continually dewatered. When you have an impoundment, the groundwater system is perched, it's mounded.
It's higher.
And when you drop the surface water 10, 15 feet, that continues to drain into the former impoundment. In fact, we had bubbling up in a lot of places in the mud, and the adjacent landowners thought it was a broken discharge pipe from something. They were all upset about toxicity. And I was like, no, this is groundwater naturally moving in and changing its elevation. So after that was all finished and the sediments were dewatered, we had a really substantial root system from all those plants. Essentially every plant in the watershed that produced seeds was growing in that flowage. So there really wasn't much need to go in and remove sediment. We shaped some of the shoreline a little bit so there wouldn't be extreme sediment drop-offs. But there really wasn't much earth moving, except for right over there where the storm sewer system discharged to the old pond. We built a retention basin so that all that dials, wrappers, and sediment and everything else could settle out before the water moved into the Prairie River.
So you did some bank sloping here, so that in
Very
high water and runoff you wouldn't.
Down by the dam, yeah.
Okay, and there was plenty more sediment down by the dam as there is in River Falls.
A lot more, right?
Yeah.
But we had some really high rainfall years after that, and a lot of that sediment got moved out because of the flooding, as happened in rivers all around here. Even natural streams lost a lot of sediment in those high rainfall flooding years.
Did you do some of that bank stabilization or bank sloping in the winter when the soil was frozen?
Well, that's the best time to do it, obviously. One of the problems is the sediment is so soft you can't get equipment. You can't put bridging in or anything. It's just there's just nothing there to support it. So with frozen sediment, you can move your equipment in and do a better job right near the stream, and then withdraw the equipment and just let the other sediment revegetate on its own without removing it. Moving sediment is a problem because where do you put it? You have to establish that there are no contaminants in it to spread it somewhere.
And we're good in that regard with the sediment in these two.
But you do have to test it and make sure you know what you're dealing with, because there are rules and regulations about metals and all kinds of other stuff that you don't want to
and you don't
find
want,
out after the fact.
And you don't want surprises. Yeah, that's right. Well, in River Falls now, the lower dam has been breached because of damage to the dam in the June floods. And it's been drawn down. And the city council is faced with a decision in the coming months to decide whether or not to allow it to be refilled, which is a concern because there's a public safety concern. We should have another high water event like the one in June when the water was 7 to 8 feet over the tops of the dams, of both dams. And if that should happen again, that water is going to force its way into the breach. And we face a different kind of collapse, which could be catastrophic.
And a problem for the future there is even under the old regime was 7 or 8 feet above. Can you imagine what's going to happen in the future with climate change increasing the amount of precipitation? I mean, we were getting in this area 32 inches of rain per year. Last year we had a 42-inch year. 42 inches, 10 inches above normal. And the 6 models in Wisconsin on climate change show that trend is going to increase.
Well, and we've experienced that in western Wisconsin.
These
too.
old dams were not designed for this amount of water coming out of the watershed. In addition, they're episodic amounts. They're really high quantities, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches of rain in one, and then drought for 2 or 3, 4 weeks. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be spread out more with smaller rainfall events. So the combination of more volume and really catastrophic events that we hadn't experienced in the past makes these dam designs from 1920, 1910, 1900 obsolete. They're just not designed to take this amount of water. And that's another good reason to really seriously consider repairing a dam, because repair doesn't change the basic hydrologic conditions that the dam was designed for. It doesn't allow you to take advantage of the safety needed. Safety needed to accommodate the larger flows that we're going to experience in the life of that dam.
And the climate scientists say are what we need to expect, that we're going to have high intensity, short duration events rather than soakers. And
it's not just dams. All of the culverts and rainfall systems in these cities are designed for 1950 to 1900 data, not the present data. So they're going to be overtaxed and flooding and providing much larger pulse events than they'd had in the past.
Well, you mentioned the storm sewer outlet farther downstream from where we are. Did the removal of this dam allow the city of Merrill to reevaluate its storm sewer management system?
We recommended that they do that, but they only did it for this part of the city that came out of that main storm sewer that's right behind us here.
Well, and this upper end is not as highly intensely developed an area as the lower area.
There's a lot of farm fields, and the school is there, and there's high hills, high bluffs there as well. So some of it doesn't drain directly to the river either. There's some internal drainage in that watershed.
So when you were working on the restoration of the corridor here, were there community groups that stepped up to take a role in it?
Not at all.
Okay.
There was only one person I know of in the entire city of Merrill that advocated for dam removal, and that was a local doctor. And other than that, everybody was against it. And we couldn't get Trout Unlimited to be interested in it. They said they knew the local politics. They had to deal with these people. They were worried about just a black eye being associated with it. They said, "Hey, DNR, go ahead, you take it. You know, and when it's all finished, we'll step in and recover and do all the other good stuff. But the removal has got to be DNR, because everybody hates DNR anyway. So what's the difference?"
You may recall that while the local chapter at TU was wary of the dam removal debate's impact on their membership and fundraising, the state council at TU stepped up and said it's the best thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely right.
That's
but
right.
The locals knew that they couldn't face their neighbors.
Yeah, that's right.
There were over 140 signs in the city.
I know. I remember. Save the lake.
I've got some photos in my slides.
Good. Yeah.
But and that period was short. I mean, after the park was finished, and people saw that the property values didn't drop, and they saw the nice river. I mean, it changed. People accommodated and realized it was for the better. Plus, who was going to come up with the $2 million? Nobody wanted to spend $2 million to repair that dam.
This is a real addition to the city of parks.
Yeah,
it's a gorgeous addition.
I agree.
And the prairie upstream has a reputation as a beautiful river, and it's well earned. But this is a beautiful addition to it. Right now my fingers are stinging, and a week before deer season, that's not necessarily a good thing to have happening. But let me ask you if there's anything else that you think is important that would be helpful for the folks the citizens of River Falls to consider when they're thinking about potential restoration and the project is going forward with the removal of the lower dam, the Junction Falls Dam, or the Powell Falls Dam, and the restoration of that corridor. And the council has agreed in concept to the removal of the upper dam, the Junction Falls Dam, that covers up the falls that gives River Falls its name. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think would be helpful to them as they consider these things going forward? What they might have?
I think the best advice on any dam removal is think long term.
Mm-hmm.
The short term anger and all the costs and all the problems really are short term. When you think about the long term health of a river and the long term amenities for the population, there is absolutely no comparison to the inconvenience and the anger and the cost of that short term removal phase compared to the advantages of the long term health of the river. It really does make a big difference to remove obstacles in a river, and it really does make a difference to allow waterfalls to be available for the public. There's lots of lakes in Wisconsin all over the place, but flowing water, especially flowing cold water, is really short on the planet. That is the smallest segment of water in the whole list of water types, ranging from the ocean to groundwater, that's available on this planet. And the more we can do to protect that, the better off we're going to be as a society.
And that's important from the point of view of the ecology of the river and the health of these river watersheds, and the discussion in River Falls hasn't carried with it the kind of rancor or divisiveness that some other dam removal discussions have. It's been a really thoughtful, many-voiced discussion, and they came to a conclusion about some decisions about the Kinney Corridor plan that the council endorsed and used in reaching their decisions on the dam removals. So it's been really a model for good planning, and people are concerned about the river, but with the two impoundments with not very good water quality that are kind of the back door of Main Street, there's not really a lot of use of those of that water.
That's what I was here too.
And the Kinney as a whole, upper and lower, has very active recreational use, a lot of aesthetic value, really a remarkable piece. And this couple mile stretch through town is an opportunity to have free flowing river in place and all the recreational and aesthetic amenities, environmental amenities that you hope to see.
And as far as looking to the future, ponds warm the water. If the more you can remove ponds or any impoundment on a trout stream, the better you're going to be to face climate change in the future. Our cold water fisheries in Wisconsin are going to be in deep trouble. All the models show that. So impoundments work against coping with a generally warming planet.
Thank you.
I've always said that river quality reflects watershed quality, and watershed quality reflects the quality of a society. And I think it's really important to recognize that the public can take pride in restoring a river, especially when you save money doing it.
And you end up with a community asset that people will revere.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Appreciate that. Okay. Well, Bob, thank you. It's been
Anytime.
really a treat